Hi, everyone. Um, Thank you for coming. We'll be starting now. So first, we'd like to give a short welcoming remark, and then we will continue with the programming for today. Hi, everyone. My name is Mi Tian Wen. I'm a member of the FGLIMed leadership, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today on behalf of the National First Gen and Low Income in Medicine Association, FGLIMed. We are excited to have you join us in our inaugural webinar series, Becoming Visible, Celebrating Community and Identity. In today's gathering, we are focusing on sharing our stories. We meet today at a very, very difficult time and heartbreaking time in our nation. Today is the funeral service of George Floyd. For many Black individuals and families, including mine and many of us in this room, it has been a very difficult time, a very painful time. I was born in Vietnam to a Black father and a Vietnamese mother in a country that didn't grant citizenship to its Black residents. In Vietnam, Black Vietnamese could not go to college and are often living in poverty, as was the case with my family. But it was more than the barring of opportunities. Our bodies were also threatened. As a child, the neighborhood children would ask me if I really have 12 buttholes, like other Black people. In school, my teachers would discipline me more harshly compared to other girls because my thick Black skin makes me tough. Throughout my childhood, I was constantly told that my Black body, is not normal. To escape this dehumanization, my family and I immigrated to the US. However, in the past 20 years, we've seen Black young men like my brother and Black men like my father unjustly murdered by the same society that we sought refuge in. In the past months, we saw the unjust death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and many, many others that were unwitnessed and unreported. In parallel, we also saw how COVID-19 has disproportionately taken Black lives because of the existing inequalities in our society and our healthcare system. Please join me in a moment of silence to mourn the unjust death of our Black family and friends. May they rest in power. This week's theme is community and identity, celebrating our often invisible identities as first-gen and low-income individuals. As a first-gen Black Vietnamese student, there were not many spaces that allowed me to express all of who I am, first-gen, low-income, Black. And in medicine, I often felt like I was the only one with my background in the room. This is where the idea for creating a space for first-gen and low-income students began. I found validation in talking with students and faculty who had similar experiences as I did. More importantly, for the first time in my life, I learned that I belong and that I am an asset rather than a risk. FGLIMed is committed to creating a community to support, empower, and advocate for the next generation of first-gen and low-income physicians. We are creating space for everyone and all of their identities. Even though we can only see each other through our screens right now, we are here for each other to listen, to empower, and to uplift our collective voices. We hope that by the end of this virtual gathering, you know in your core that you belong and that you deserve every opportunity presented to you. Go forth and conquer. Medicine needs you. Our community needs you. And our country needs you. This is the beginning of celebrating identity and becoming visible. Before I hand over the spotlight to Anil to introduce our keynote, I want to say once more on behalf of the FGLIMed National Association welcome. It's wonderful, really wonderful to see all of you here today.
Thank you, Mitian. Hi, everyone. My name is Anil Fernandez, and I'm one of the FGLIMed board members. And it is an honor for me to introduce this afternoon's amazing and inspiring keynote speaker, who will be kicking off our 3-day virtual conference, Dr. Hilda Hutcherson. Dr. Hutcherson was born in a low-income rural community in Alabama and was the first in her family to attend college. She attended Stanford University for undergrad and received her medical training for Harvard Medical School before completing a medicine internship at the University of California in San Francisco and her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Columbia University Medical Center in New York. She is a nationally renowned expert in the field of women's health and is an accomplished author of several books. She has been named by Black Enterprise as one of America's leading physicians, named one of the top doctors in New York in the Castle Connolly Guide, and is included in the Best Doctors in America database. Currently, Dr. Hutcherson is a professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Columbia University Medical Center and serves as a senior associate for Dean of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs at Columbia University Badgelos College of Physicians and Surgeons. As dean, she has worked tirelessly to develop and strengthen opportunities, programming, and support for underrepresented minority students. As founder and leader of the Kenneth A. Ford Diversity Alliance, she has made great strides in connecting and celebrating diverse faculty, house staff, researchers, and students, while also strengthening mentoring and pipeline programs and bringing the contributions of underrepresented minorities to the forefront. I personally met Dr. Hutcherson about 7 years ago at a pre-medical pipeline program, and her story, along with our conversations, have always left me empowered. She provided invaluable support in the development and growth of the first generation and low-income group here at Columbia's medical school. And I feel grateful to have learned so much from her since my time at the medical school and believe there's no one more fit to kick off this conference. Please help me welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Hutcherson.
Thank you, Anil, for that very generous introduction. Before I begin my talk, I'd like to acknowledge the pain, sadness, and deep concern that many of us feel after the killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and the countless lives lost to anti-Black violence. This violence, especially against the backdrop of COVID-19's disproportionate impact on communities of color, is a heavy load to bear. We must work together and stand in solidarity while working to shape a more just society. To all of you who have struggled and continue to struggle due to injustice, I see you. I'd like to thank the leadership of the National First. Somehow I muted myself, sorry. I'd like to thank the leadership of the National First Generation and Low Income in Medicine Association for the invitation to speak to you today. I was asked to speak about my journey, and it's never been easy for me to talk about my life and my past. And it is really based on my upbringing. I was taught that good girls don't boast or call attention to themselves. Good girls are seen, but not heard. And this affected me negatively when I was a third-year medical student. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today. As Anil said, I grew up in a small town, Tuskegee, Alabama. Tuskegee is most famous for Tuskegee Institute, now known as Tuskegee University, a historically Black college that was founded in 1881 and was home to Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver. It was home to the first Black hospital in Alabama and the first full-service hospital for African Americans in the United States. and the Tuskegee Airmen were stationed there. So Tuskegee had this very vibrant Black middle class of physicians, nurses, professors, lawyers, and other professionals. But it was also the site of the Tuskegee Experiment. From 1932 to 1972, 399 Black men with syphilis were given periodic exams and told that they were being treated for bad blood. In fact, they were not treated, even after penicillin was found to be curative, in order to study the advanced stages of the disease. The men in this study were poor, therefore their lives seemingly had less value. These men were from my side of town, neighbors and friends of my parents and grandparents. Like others in my neighborhood, my siblings and I received our health care and immunizations at the public health clinic, and some of the same nurses that participated in the Tuskegee syphilis study provided care for my family. My father left school after the 9th grade to help take care of his mom and 7 siblings when his father left looking for work and never returned. When he was old enough, he joined the Army. And after active duty, he married my mom after she graduated from high school. And he took a job at the VA hospital as a janitor. I was the oldest of 5 children. We were poor, but we didn't really know we were poor. We didn't feel poor because everybody in our neighborhood was the same. Everybody looked out for each other. And when we had plenty of food, my dad shared it with others in the community. And as children, sometimes we question our dad, why he made us share when we had so little. And he would say that others had even less, and we must take care of each other. Those values of generosity, empathy, and kindness taught by my dad would later make me a better doctor. We grew much of our own food in our garden. My mother sewed our clothes with scraps of discarded fabric that was sent by her sister who had gone up north to work in a clothing factory. And when I was old enough, I learned to sew and I made my own clothes. My father told me from an early age, get knowledge in your head. It's the one thing they can't take away from you. My mother said that education would be my way out of poverty. They both wanted me to have a chance at a better life. So mom taught me to read at 3 and math at 4, so I was able to skip the 1st grade. My father brought medical books from the VA hospital library, and I devoured them even though I couldn't read most of the words. He purchased a set of World Book encyclopedias from a traveling salesman on credit and worked extra hours to pay off the debt. Reading those encyclopedias every day allowed me to dream of a better life and to travel the world in my mind. While in high school, I discovered a love for science and participated in biological research at Tuskegee Institute with a biology professor. I won local, state, and national science contests, which led me to Stanford, a school I had never heard of. But a family member who was stationed at a Navy base in the Bay Area told me that it was a good school. I was accepted and given a full scholarship. My parents had never attended college and could not tell me what to expect. So the day I left for Palo Alto, my father simply said, stay away from that dope, but couldn't tell me what dope was or what it looked like. My mother said, stay away from those boys, but didn't tell me why or how I was supposed to do that in college, especially in a co-ed dorm. Stanford was challenging in so many ways. There were only a few students who looked like me. Girls were a minority, Blacks even more so. And even fewer of the students were from low-income families. I was a unicorn. I showed up in my homemade clothes, a few luxury items from our shopping trip to Kmart, my new pair of $5 shoes that my dad was so proud of, and immediately felt very much out of place. Poverty was the greatest divider. Stanford was described as a country club, but I didn't know what that meant. Some students said I spoke funny, and I was often told, say something, say something. I was different. I recall hearing that another Black student had received a BMW for his high school graduation, and I had to ask, what's a BMW? I remember being invited to a fancy dinner where the table settings included 2 forks, 3 knives, and 3 spoons, and not having a clue why there were so many utensils or which one I should use first. Now, this may seem like something really small and insignificant, but for me, it created great anxiety and feelings of being an imposter. If I pick up the wrong utensil, everyone will know my secret. There was wealth everywhere at Stanford. As a first-generation student from a low-income family, I stood out. I was different. I didn't belong. My confidence from high school was destroyed. For the first time in my life, I felt shame. I was ashamed to be poor and ashamed of feeling ashamed. My parents had worked so hard and made so many sacrifices so that I could have a chance at a better life. How could I feel anything other than pride? I never talked honestly about my life in Alabama. I didn't want to be different. I didn't have a strong education background from my public school in Alabama, and it was hard. I didn't know how to talk to my professors or the value of office hours, so I avoided them. Fortunately for me, when I received a C in general chemistry, my wonderful advisor, Dr. William C. DeMint, love that man, said to me, be happy you passed. Continue to work hard and it will get easier. Ask for help. And the best, delay gratification when I wanted to spend my weekends on the beach. These are all words of wisdom that I impart to high school and college students every day. So I worked hard and my grades improved. Most importantly, I admitted my deficiencies, swallowed my pride, and asked for help, including from my better prepared classmates. And this is a message that I give to pre-medical and medical students at Columbia all the time. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. After graduation, I entered Harvard Medical School. I had finally arrived. I was in medical school, something that I'd worked hard for all of my life. From conversations, though, it quickly became apparent that most of my classmates were from wealthy families, and many were children of physicians. There were 5 Black women in my class, and we all sat together in the last row, left-hand corner of the lecture hall for 2 years. We supported each other and we felt stronger together. But even in that group of Black women, I was the only one from a first-generation low-income background, though I never talked about it. During my first clinical clerkship, a patient asked me to remove her bedpan, and another asked me to take her food tray to the kitchen, despite the fact that I was wearing a white coat, a stethoscope around my neck, and a name tag with my name and Harvard Medical School student. There were daily microaggressions. Most painful were the derogatory comments that were commonly made about low-income, uninsured, immigrant, or minority patients in my presence. Patients who could easily have been members of my family or community. I felt powerless, voiceless, and invisible, and it hurt. Again, I didn't feel that I belonged. Perhaps the admissions office had made a mistake. I remember the many people who had told me throughout my life that I would never become a doctor. I had 3 strikes against me. I was poor. I was Black. And I was a girl. I felt like an imposter. I was living a lie. Everyone seemed to know where to go, what to do, when to do it, except me. The other students had a confidence that eluded me. They knew how to dress and they could afford the proper attire. They knew their way around the hospital and they understood hospital culture. They'd already established relationships with the attending faculty. They were a part of the same social circles. They were members of the same country clubs. Their families played tennis and golf together. They had easy conversations in a way that I could not. I didn't even know what I didn't know or what questions to ask. I didn't belong. I didn't feel that I was good enough. I was suffering from imposter syndrome. I went to the Dean of Minority Affairs, Dr. Alvin Poussant, a psychiatrist, and I told him how I was feeling. He said, "You're not alone. What you're feeling is common," and that he had felt the same way when he was in medical school. So I felt a little better for a while, but I had to go back for a booster many more times. But I made it. And as I walked across the stage at graduation, I looked into the audience and I saw my dad crying for the first time in my life. I started my residency at Columbia University Medical Center. I was the first Black female resident in OBGYN at Columbia and one of only a few women. I must say, those were the worst 4 years of my life. Residency beat me down. I was physically and emotionally exhausted and demoralized. One day, I was driving down the West Side Highway and I glanced down at the river. I wonder how long it will take me to drown if I drive straight into it, I thought. Will it hurt? And how can I make it look like an accident so my parents won't suffer as much? It was clear at that moment that I was suffering from depression. I sought therapy and treatment. And I used this experience to let young trainees know that depression is common in physicians and students. It can be treated. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness. So I say to you, take care of your mental health. Take good care of your mental health. Therapy helped me to remove my invisibility cloak and accept the whole of me, all of me. I decided to use my story to help others. I was now able to see my value as a physician when taking care of patients from a background that was similar to my own. I understood the challenges of poverty. I spoke the same language. My patients trusted me. I could advocate for them. There was a kinship of spirit. We were a team. When I finished my residency, I was placed in charge of the OBGYN clinic for women with Medicaid or were uninsured. I took my experience from childhood, waiting in the public health clinic to be seen, to make positive changes in the way that healthcare was provided to these women. I was able to change the system so that patients were given a specific appointment time to prevent spending hours waiting to be seen. It made sure that patients saw the same physician for continuity of care. Quality of care was improved. I chose a career in academic medicine because I wanted to provide mentorship and guidance to pre-meds and medical students from backgrounds similar to my own. As Senior Associate Dean of Diversity, I have written grants and now run 5 pipeline programs for students who are from minority populations, are first generation, from low-income families, or combinations of all 3. I tell my story as a means of inspiring students to continue on their journey, even when it seems that the barriers are too high. If I can do it, you can do it. Besides medicine, I've written 3 books. I wrote monthly women's health columns for Essence, Glamour, Redbook magazines for more than 14 years. I've appeared on countless television and radio shows, and I'm also the mother of 4 children. Looking back, my identity as a first-generation student from a low-income family is a superpower. I'm a better doctor, a better advocate for my patients. I'm a better mentor. I'm a better teacher. And I wish I'd known this when I was a student. My advice to you is to own your journey and embrace your fly status. Wear it like a badge of honor. Be visible. Be proud. Know that there is no shame in poverty. Your grit and resilience will make you a better doctor. Find a mentor who has a similar background. That mentor might be a faculty member, an alum, or even a more senior student. Start your own chapter of first generation low income student association in college or in medical school. Many universities and medical schools are becoming aware of the need and are willing to fund. Advocate and speak up for your patients. There is a purpose in your journey, and as you rise, reach back to help others. Thank you for your kind attention.
I'd like to thank you, Dr. Hutcherson, for your remarks. I found them incredibly resonant, and I imagine that for the several hundred people who have joined us, they were as well. In particular, I related to what you said about having luxury items from Kmart, worrying about the silverware, and experiencing that strange intersection of shame and pride in where you're from, what it taught you, and how it feels to carry that in a new world. And I also appreciated that I'm not the only one who has avoided office hours because I didn't know what they were for, or if I was allowed to go. For everyone else who's here to join us today, my name is Katie Haveman. I'm a fourth year medical student at Vanderbilt University, and it's my privilege to be here to moderate a question and answer session with Dr. Hutcherson. I will start with a question that has been on my mind, and I strongly encourage you, if you have thoughts or questions to share, to please put them in the chat box, and I will pose them to Dr. Hutcherson as they occur. One of the things that I have been thinking about as part of the FGLIMed board is that we are here to serve students, and one of the points you made about asking for help not being a weakness, I think probably resonates for many of us. And I wondered if you might speak to what might give a student the internal sense that now is the time to reach out and ask, because sometimes it's hard to know, is it too soon? So I wonder if you would weigh in on what might be a good time to reach out to someone you trust.
I think it's always a good time. What I say to young people is you don't want to wait until you're actually having problems or you're having trouble. You want to be in the professor's face from day one. I tell them, introduce yourself, let them know who you are, and to actually show up for office hours. Even if you're shy like I was, just show up and be there. If you don't ask a single question, you let everybody else ask the questions, you're learning from that experience. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes and the more natural it becomes. And you're able to participate more. But often the students who show up for office hours are not the ones who need to be there. But they come from families where their parents have gone to college, they may be physicians, and they tell them from day one when they go off to college, make sure you go to office hours. But my parents didn't know that, so they didn't tell me. So that is my advice, is not to wait until you have problems, but to be there from the beginning, from the first office hours. And I also think it's important to find a friend that you can trust, that you can study with, and maybe the two of you can go to office hours together and make yourself feel a little bit stronger. But it is a huge mistake to avoid the office hours because you're afraid of asking a silly question. You're afraid that the professor is going to figure out that you don't know as much as, you should, or as the next person, right? So that would be my advice.
Thank you. We have gotten several wonderful questions in the chat box, and in particular, I see one that was also reflected in the narrative comments we received as people registered. Somebody poses the question, how do we speak about our hardships in a way that helps others understand? Put another way, in our registration comments, we were asked, how can I tell my story of hardship in a way that comes across as empowerment, that reflects the skills and values that I have that make me an asset, rather than having the readers focus on the challenges that I endured?
Often students will say to me, I don't want people to feel sorry for me if I tell my story. And that's not the point. You're not telling the story for people to feel sad. I mean, you notice in my story, I talked about what I learned from the experience, the values that I gained from being a first-generation low-income student. These stories are so powerful. Now, what I noticed when I was in school was that the kids who were wealthier were always telling their story. They were always talking about where they were going on vacation and what they got for graduation. That's how I knew the kid had a BMW. He was telling everybody. They don't mind telling their stories. But at the time, I didn't feel comfortable telling mine because I felt different. But now I tell my story all the time. I go to meetings, I tell everybody. Because I think I learned so much and my values are so strong from having that experience. My grit, my determination, my resilience have made me a stronger person, a better doctor, a better professor, a better mentor. So stories are important. And when I tell the story, I always focus on the positive aspects of it. Yes, I suffered, but what did I learn from that suffering? And how can I use what I learned from that suffering to help others?
Thank you. We have another question that says, sometimes I feel it difficult to speak up during clinic in medical school. How did you find the courage to do this? I feel not as intelligent as others sometimes, and like I'm at medical school because I am the token student.
Oh, I can identify with this in so many ways. And I'm an attending now. So periodically I'm the attending of the clerkship, and I have students, and I can tell the ones who are reluctant to say anything. And so I make sure that everybody gets an opportunity. I go around the room and make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. Because when I love telling the story about when I went to Harvard, my first 3 clerkships, I just kind of sat there and didn't say anything. And I was always afraid to raise my hand, and I was afraid to say anything unless I was directly asked a question, because I didn't want to say the wrong thing. And I couldn't quote the New England Journal of Medicine the way this doctor's son always did. But I realized when I read my evaluations that when I didn't speak, people thought I didn't know anything. And in my evaluations, they questioned my fund of knowledge, and I did not like that at all. So I found that I had to find my voice. And I practiced in the mirror. I practiced during my presentation, the mirror. I started slowly asking a question and realized that by speaking up, nothing bad happened to me. And I would ask more questions, and I looked at my colleagues who were asking the stupidest questions, and they had no fear. They didn't care. They asked their questions. They felt very comfortable asking those stupid questions. I mean, no question is stupid, but you know what I mean? So I said, if they can do that, I can do that too. I remember there was this medical student, his dad was the head of a department. I won't name which department because he'll know who I'm talking about. But he was always speaking up, and he wasn't always right. A lot of the time he was wrong. But he felt that confidence to do it. So I said, well, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to start speaking up. And as I found my voice, and initially my heart would be racing, I'm sure my blood pressure was up. I started to sweat. It's so hard to get those words out. But the more I tried, the easier it became. And I realized that nothing bad was going to happen to me if I gave the wrong answer, that was a method of learning. So it did take time. And at Columbia, sometimes students will come to me with the same story, and I would coach them. And I say, present to me first. Present to your resident first. Present to this faculty member over here first. And just get accustomed to speaking and asking questions. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. But it was really difficult. As I said, I grew up in Alabama where women weren't supposed to talk. So it wasn't easy. But with practice, find a coach, find a partner, find another student who feels the same way, and you guys work together to get over this shyness and difficulty speaking up.
So in that vein, we've gotten a couple of questions about mentoring. This one reads, identifying mentors is a daunting task for a lot of students. Many universities have vocal faculty that wish to mentor, but it can feel burdensome to ask for help. How can we find mentors beyond our own school or programs? And another person asks, how can I find mentors who are supportive of first-gen low-income students or in a place where there are no mentors with a background like mine?
Yeah. I think that in most schools, there are people with similar backgrounds, but they're not visible and they don't speak about their experiences. Going to student affairs, faculty affairs, alumni office, and asking them to send letters or emails out to faculty, stating that there's a need for faculty with that experience. Often, or most of the time, the people with similar experiences will come forward and be helpful. If you're at an institution and that's not possible, if you have friends at other institutions, you might reach out to their Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs. I mentor students from around the country who are not students at my institution. People who've heard me speak will ask if I can mentor them, and I never say no. I think it's important for us who have gone through the experience of being a FLI student and who have become successful to lend our support to others in similar situations. So I would go to I try to start my own organization if I could of FLI students. I would speak to student affairs, faculty affairs, alumni affairs, anybody pretty much who has access to faculty or alums who might have the same similar experience, and try to find mentors that way.
Thank you, Dr. Hutcherson. We also have received a couple of questions about your pipeline programs. Would you share in brief what those programs are, and we will send that information out to participants as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we have several pipeline programs. Our pipeline programs start in middle school and high school for students in New York City, basically northern Manhattan, Washington Heights, and Harlem. We have let's see, 3 or 4. Okay. We have one program that's a national program, and that's SHEPET, for college students who would like to go into medicine or another health profession. We have MedPrep, which is both basically the same, except you have to live in New York. We have a Get Up program that goes throughout the year for college students, mainly college students who are in community colleges or the city colleges in New York. We have a pipeline program for students who want to go into public health medicine, which I think is extremely important. And that is sponsored by the CDC, and that occurs during the summer. And then we have one more, which the name is escaping me right now. I don't remember which one I named. But anyway, I can certainly give you all of that information, and you can share with the people on the call. Be happy to.
Wonderful. We can make sure that that gets sent out to everyone so that those of you who asked and those of you who are wondering can look into that. Much appreciated. We are in the last 5 minutes here, so I'll just pick a couple of these questions. These, for the audience, I just want to say I deeply appreciate these questions. They are thoughtful, and it's clear how much you have connected with Dr. Hutcherson's story. And I wish very much that we could pose all of these. I'm trying to capture them in themes. A couple of the questions that we've gotten have been around mental health and imposter syndrome. Sort of 2 or 3 pieces of that. Are there resources you would suggest for wrestling with your imposter syndrome? And what has your experience been when you do speak up about mental health?
Yeah. When I speak up about mental health, it's amazing the number of people who come up to me after my talk to say, I struggle as well. When I speak to medical students, I speak to college students. So many of us are struggling with our mental health. And I know in my community, we didn't believe in that. And in many communities, they don't believe in that. They don't believe in mental health. When I was growing up, if someone said, I don't feel good, I feel sad. I mean, I feel really, really, really sad. I want to hurt myself. The answer was to go to church. So they didn't believe that it existed. And over the years, I found that this is extremely common in undergraduate students and very, very common in medical schools. And in fact, when I speak to the first year class, on the first day of orientation, I tell people that you may feel depressed on this journey. And I tell them that I also have been depressed on my journey, and that I found help through therapy, and at one point even medication for depression. So by sharing that story with others, I think it helps people to see that they're not alone, and that they can go and seek the help that they need. I mean, the majority, every doctor I know has been depressed. I don't know any doctors who haven't been depressed. It just goes with the territory, I think. In knowing that it is common, that it can be treated, that there's no shame in feeling depressed, I think is very helpful to the groups that I speak to. And what was your first part? I think I started with the second part of the question.
That's a great question. So mental health and resources for wrestling with imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I didn't bring any websites, but there, AAMC, I think, has something on imposter syndrome. I can try to gather some resources and send them to you that you can send out to people, because I think it is important to seek out those resources. So I can try to put something together for you and send to you and make that available for all the students. But I think just talking about it, talking about how you feel, finding other students who are going through the same thing. And sometimes there's students in your class, and sometimes they're older students who have gone through the same type of feelings. Finding faculty members who you think have had similar experiences and talking to them, I think are other good ways of dealing with the imposter syndrome. It made me feel so much better when my Dean of Diversity said, I felt that same way when I was in medical school, and look where I am. And I was like, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Because now I feel a little bit better. But I had to keep going back and keep going back. And he had to tell me that over and over and over again to get me through.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hutcherson. I suspect many of us feel exactly as you just described, a little bit better knowing that there are others out there who share the themes of this experience. We are at the conclusion of our question and answer session. We will now go ahead and take a 5-minute break before we move into our town hall, where we would be thrilled to have all of you join us. We'll have an introduction to FGLIMed followed by some breakout groups. I'd like everybody to put their hands together again, and thank you, Dr. Hutcherson, so much for joining us.
Thank you. Can I stay for the town hall?
Please do. We'd love that.
I'd like to.